Board of Education meeting on Tuesday, January 28th at 6 o'clock. If you could please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mrs. Snyder. Here. Mrs. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Dr. Stafford.
Here.
Mr. McDonald.
Here.
We'll start with our presentations. Our first presentation is Character Education Program with Mr. Laird.
Okay. I'm here in a capacity of two roles tonight. One is as Vice Chairman of the Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, and Southeast Indiana Character Council, and a representative as the Family Director for the Knights of Columbus for the parishes on this side of town. So I'll start off by character education. The last few months have been a boomer of character development for us, an award. So last week, we had a great character program at the middle school. Mr. Elementary with Mr. Biedenbach and Mrs. Sims, and several of our board members were there. Great program. Several months ago, we received our Heroes of Character Awards. And one of the things I want to do is to acknowledge the staff members in our district who support character development, and it's gotten us the awards that we have. So at this dinner that we had back in November, we had Mrs. Ozer, was a hero of character, Mrs. Heisel, Alyssa Eichelberger, Maria Gates, Tracy Pennington, and Wiley Glasgow. We're all recognized as being heroes of character. Now, this may not seem like much, but this area covers from roughly Dayton down to Alexandria, Kentucky, and Southeast Indiana out past Batesville. So this is huge. So of that event there were 15 honorees. And of the 15, we had 6. The night of the banquet, we had more representatives there to support our recipients than anyone else there. And I think what was especially gratifying for me, from being from Three Rivers, is the support that we had. Mr. Smiley came, his daughter's 13th birthday. He's out in Westchester at the character banquet supporting his recipients, right? Did I get that right?
Yes.
I get kind of sidetracked sometimes. So yeah, Mrs. Sims was there. We had, who else? We had a whole bunch. Pam Ray. Yeah, we had a lot of staff members there. Mr. Coleman, Mrs. Jones. We had a lot of people there to support our kids and help them enjoy the moment. But it just doesn't happen. And this is another reason I'm here, is that part of my role as the vice chairman is to coordinate the nomination process for the heroes, to get them there, and then to make sure the invitations go out. So we utilize, Mrs. Sims has helped us over the years with, we stuff 1,100 envelopes of invitations to people on our mailing list. Okay, so if you haven't done this, she supplies the Tina Cole's group, Builders Club. Okay, Builders Club or Honor Society. So you got 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and they've got to put 4 things together and put them in an envelope. I didn't realize how trying that I had been out too long. So it gets to be a process, but they help us with that. We came to a real problem this year in that in past years in southeastern Indiana, they handled our postage. So the president of the bank there, they handled the postage for these 1,100 mailings. Okay, well, the bank got new ownership. So we were waiting for them to tell us when to bring the mail down. Well, what happened is they backed out on us at the last minute. And these were dated materials. So we were kind of in a bind. So I talked to Mr. Hockenberry and said, is there any way that you could help us out? You've got the machine that stamps, okay? We'll pay for the stamps. And if you just let us use your machine. That sounds pretty easy, okay? So we got it together. We got down there, and then Mrs. Mink was assigned to help us. And that sounds pretty easy too. You just put 1,100. Well, the machine gets boogered up, and you're putting 2 stamps on, and you're not getting stamps on others, and stuff like that. But the staff accommodated us, okay? Then I came down and Mrs. Gunmer, she worked with me on paying for the stamps, right? So that we were strictly legit all the way through, okay? But the big program with community or character ed is Mr. Henderson. He coordinates the whole character ed process over the years. He takes care of the nominations for Three Rivers and makes sure that they get to me. Lisa, Mrs. Whiteley, where you at? Mrs. Whiteley, she did the video of the recipients this year. So that was huge. That's taking time out of somebody's busy schedule to accommodate our needs. So we wanted to thank the Three Rivers Board of Education and your staffs for allowing us to be part of your programs. Okay, so that's that one. Do I get 3 minutes for this one?
I guess.
Okay. So I want to go over.
You're pushing.
Okay. Now, the next one is the Knights of Columbus. Okay, they're a fraternal organization that that we have men from St. Joe's, Visitation, St. Al's on Bridgetown, and St. Bernard. Those are the men that we draw from. Okay, and one of the programs that we have under my auspices is the Measure Up campaign. And that's been going on for 24 years. And it's a deal where we collect money in April. We have a big fundraiser called Measure Up. And they donate monies to this program for special needs students. Okay, so we collect the money. In the last several years, we've done very well. Years ago, our numbers were about $600 a year. And we give half the money to Ross School and half the money goes to ours. So this year, when Mrs. Rivet came down to get her check, it was for over $3,000. So they always tell us what they do, but it's like any organization that asks for money. You give them the money, and you don't really know what it goes to. You know they're doing it for what you want, but you don't really know. So at any rate, after the meeting, Megan suggested that, well, you give us this money every year. Would you like to see how we spend it? We tell you we spend it on taking the special students out on field trips. So in your mind, if you're one of the guys in the club, you just think, well, they're just going out on a field trip, to go into the Reds game or whatever. And you really need to know that it's really an educational setting. So Megan hooked us up with Mrs. Rivet or Mrs. Vincent and Mrs. Lakehamp. So we went and had lunch with the special kids at Skyline. And Mrs. Lakehamp explained to us, there were only three of us, that the program is designed to help them know how to interact at a meal. That these are learning experiences. So when the kids come in, they're going to sit next to you. And they have a sheet. They had a sheet. And she explained that there was instruction before this with the kids. Now you're going to sit with a couple of old men, and we want you to talk to them. And so ask them, and it helped us too on interacting with them. So the thing was, this did more for our organization because the guys went back and talked about it at the next meeting. And coincidentally, the older group went to the cyclone or the hockey team. They went to the hockey match, and Dan Warnock, one of our members, was at this hockey match and saw our kids. And we explained to him that was another role. That the older kids got to go to that environment. So all in all, I think what we want to say is thanks for letting us be a part of the program. I want you to know that we appreciate the lengths to which the staff goes to make the use of our money meaningful to us. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, just
All right, next up, we have thanks to our athletic trainers, Mrs. Sims.
So I'm not here in my position role, but just as a parent. So I really like to thank the board, and I just thank our athletic program for the partnership with UC Health. Over 2 weeks ago, Ellie got injured at a game out in Marymount, and I think I never really looked at having athletic trainers and everything in that light, except we were out at Marymount and they didn't have one. So she falls, breaks her arm,
It's obvious, and Tracy can tell you because I was broken around with Tracy before too. So it's broke, but there's no one there. I mean, they didn't even have a little orange little container of stuff to help, So they take Ellie off, and I mean, it was the whole. Chris had already called Betsy back at school. Betsy's telling him things. Mr. Ozer is out in the crowd trying to get magazines and everything to make a splint. And we get magazines and tongue depressors, and they rig up a little splint for her arm. And Betsy, who is one of our trainers, we go back to Taylor. She says, come back. I have an appointment the next day, which if I would have gone to Good Sam, I wouldn't have had an appointment the next day. I have an appointment the next day. She rewraps her arm, and you know what I mean? And you're kind of on your way. But I've just seen that. I know others don't have a good experience. I have to say that with mine, Marymount didn't have one. They called Larry the next day to apologize. We weren't angry. There was no anger in it, but you appreciate that we have an athletic trainer at our JV games. We have them at the junior high games, so that when kids are injured, they get attention, whether it's a Band-Aid, whether it's a bag of ice, there's something that goes on, and there's that follow-up care, there's that offer. And I think that that's what I left home. We don't acknowledge that they're there. If you call Betsy, she helps you. I know that I was in the concession stand. We had a girl from another team come up, and the dad wanted a bag of ice. Child had fell, just needed. I went back to get the bag of ice, and Betsy was like, no, I'll take it out. She came out and talked to people. She could have handed me a bag of ice and just put it there. And you can see that just on the court, that our trainers go out to the kids. They're working with both teams. And I just think we need to recognize that, because we're very fortunate with the number of trainers that we have. And on a given day, like on a Friday night football game, you can see 3 of the doctors out there on the field. And I don't think unless you go into UC Health, do you know that there are actual doctors that are down on that field? So I'd like to thank you all for having that partnership and keeping that going. I think it helps our kids, and it can actually limit some of the injuries and the severity of them because they give us attention.
Thank you. Next up, we have the TMS Hope Squad with Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Rainbow.
I have to admit, I came in looking, where's the podium? And I could stand here like this, like give these people my back, but then you get my back, so I'm not sure which is worse. So. I'm Dave Henderson, counselor at Taylor Middle School. This is Renee Randall, 7th grade math teacher at Taylor Middle School. And unfortunately, the reason our topic is not a great one, but unfortunately, it's kind of a sign of the times. We have instituted the Hope Squad. And I'm going to read kind of a blurb that I put together that gives some very basic information. And if you would like more information, by all means, contact us. And we've got tons of statistics, which are very sobering. But bottom line, Hope Squad is set up, is a school-based peer-to-peer suicide prevention program for students with a multi-year curriculum that emphasizes suicide prevention fundamentals, self-care, and anti-bullying. The Hope Squad acts as the eyes and ears of the school, providing a link between struggling students and adult help. Hope Squad members are empowered to seek help and potentially save a life. Research has shown that teens are the first to know about suicide risks in friends, but tragically, 7 out of 10 have chosen not to tell an adult. Teens are already intervening with suicidal friends, thinking they are the only ones with enough trust to deal with the situation. Our students were chosen by their peers, confidentially selecting fellow students that they felt comfortable talking with if the need ever arose. In this first year, we have 24 students that comprise our Hope Squad. Training is ongoing throughout the school year. After the first session, students are considered a gatekeeper, which means they are now have an understanding of QPR, which is a screening device or first step in the process of identifying or helping a classmate with suicidal ideation. QPR stands for question, persuade, and refer. So to kind of sum it up, we have students who are identified. They are identified to the student body. They have been trained. We have had different sessions. They are a gatekeeper. The selection process was the students were instructed one day, get your Chromebook, log in on this, watch this short video, and put down 3 names of kids that you would trust. So there's no chance of politicking, put me down, or hey, let's mess with this kid and put his name down or her name down. So it is quite an honor to be chosen. All of the students in that grade thought, yeah, I could be comfortable walking if I felt bad, if I felt like doing something. And it's not always, I think I'm going to do something, but it might just be something that they're really unsure. Kids are going to talk to other kids a lot quicker than they'll come in and say something to an adult most of the time. So they are trained, and the QPR model is the first thing and the most difficult thing is as you're talking to the student, you have to put that question out there. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Are you thinking about taking your own life? That's the big. Establish that first, persuade them to agree to get help, convince them I'm on your side, we are in this together, we will get help, and then refer. And refer means come to Mrs. Randall or myself, where we then go on from that point. Contacting family and then other help and so on and so forth. So QPR, if you ever hear that again, question, persuade, refer, is a huge component in this model. So the kids are planning, and all the information that we have shows groups in different buildings. The kids are planning several acts of kindness, including getting together in a huge group in the lobbies, greeting students as they come in, and that is funny in itself because kids come staggering in and you say, good morning, and you get a lot of weird responses, but they are going to stand in the lobby, say good morning, hand them a piece of candy or a positive message card, something like that. Random signs of encouragement and positivity will also be created and posted around in random places in the building, on kids' lockers, in the classrooms, and so on and so forth. We are in our infancy. This is a program that started 2015. Started in Provo, Utah. A parent, her son took his life, and she thought we've got to do more than this. And the numbers are just staggering in different states and so on, where students are taking their lives, feeling that there's just so much despair. There's just no reason to go on. So this is a school-based model, as I said, that the kids are really kind of driving this thing. We are here as advisors. We are the parties that they come to and give them guidance and so on. But bottom line, it's their program, and these kids are amazing. They really bought into it, and they're really dedicated to it. And we will each year add a few more and train them. And as I mentioned, there's also kind of some components. I was looking further ahead in our trainings. There's some other things as far as just the climate of the school, and I'm real glad there's an anti-bullying message that kind of just tries to work on just getting better communication through the kids. So I won't take any more of your time. But as I said, if anybody else has any more questions about Hope Squad, you may have seen it. I think in November, December, it was on a few different news broadcasts. That Hope Squad, it's kind of bigger in Mason, Lakota, and so on. They've kind of really jumped on it, but other schools are starting to get it. So I wanted to be able to come in and tell you folks that we have that as well. High school has it as well. I'm not really sure where they are at with their training, but we wanted to let you know that the middle school is definitely working on this, and we'll stay with this for sure. One of the things we want to be able to do is they offer a t-shirt, sweatshirt kind of thing. The problem is you can't go to the local t-shirt shop and get a shirt made. You have to go with their logo. You have to go with their store, and their prices are not like what you can find anywhere else in the tri-state area. So if anybody has some suggestions on ways to get some funding together for these jackets, these shirts that these 24 kids would love to have, we want to get a group photo with them on, so we can put them on our rotation on the screens in the building that show them as a big group, and hey, these are the kids you go to if you have questions or concerns. So certainly love to have that conversation at some point with getting some money together so we can get that underway. Do you want to say anything? I just stole the show.
You did, you're fine. I talk all day long. I'm good.
Yeah.
I listened all day.
I mean, I just have a comment.
Yes.
So, I think all 3 things we heard tonight in the presentation are just key examples of things that I think probably should show up in our strategic plan as we move forward. So when we talk about development, a pillar of development, we're not just talking about professionally developing teachers and those sorts of things. We're talking about developing the whole child. And I think that these are just good examples of things that probably should show up as we address those pillars in our strategic plan of how do we view character ed in the Hope Squad in building over the next 5 years in our district. And we should make it a point that those should appear in our strategic plan, and we should have action steps to get to something like that. So I appreciate you coming and explaining that, because those are things that as a board we hear about, but we don't necessarily know exactly the mission of them. So same thing with character ed. You have athletic trainers. I mean, I think all that stuff is really working into developing the whole child, and then health and safety with the athletic trainers. So I appreciate all three presentations, and I think it's a good example of just things that we are doing that should tie in to our strategic plan process.
Funny you should ask. Here's the flyer.
Yeah.
You could just Venmo me.
We did have it. The t-shirts, hold on, let me get all the stuff.
While she's getting it together, I'm gonna jump on another thing. One of the things that often happens if something has come through and a student is expressing that, one of the first things a parent will say is, where do we get help? And you can go off and we can recommend a number of places to go, but oftentimes there's an issue with transportation or costs and so on. I love Children's Home, and I don't know what connection you all have with Children's Home and their renewal each year, something like that. That those women, they're all women right now, are therapists, but they are a godsend. They come in the building, they have a list of students they meet with every single day, and they are just amazing. I wish we could get about 2 or 3 more because the need is there. But any future conversations about Children's Home, don't let them go away. We really need them in place. They are amazing people, and they are very dedicated, and they are so helpful. And they are a logical step from this to getting home. So a lot of kids are getting help that they might not because it means I gotta leave work early and take them, or it's so helpful to all of us.
And that's only 2 cars designed, so 3 rivers.
Microphone.
Fill out your order form later. Okay, well, thank you again for all 3 of our presentations. We'll move on to the superintendent's report with Mr. Hockenberry.
Yes, thank you. Welcome, everybody, members of the public, staff, and board. I just wanted to take a quick second, if I could personally, and just thank the Board of Education, my team, the community, and everything for working with me when my father passed away a couple weeks ago. The outpouring of support was amazing, and I really appreciate that for everybody that took the time to do that. The show goes on, like my dad said, so it's time to get back to work. Another update I want to give everybody is the public health update that our district is facing right now. I call it the yellow jacket flu. Right now, what we're looking at is yesterday, the 27th and the 28th today, very clear pattern of absences, both with the students and with the staff. On Monday, we had over 30 staff out, and approximately 15% of our student population out sick with the same symptoms. We monitored it very closely yesterday, sent a email out to our parents last night. We've contacted just about everybody you could contact in the health field, and we monitored it today. We were hoping today that we would turn the corner. Unfortunately, that was not the case. We had 141 kids out at the elementary, 133 out at the middle school, and I think we crested about 130 at the high school today at the end of the day, bringing us a little over 400, which is about 18.5% of our population. So work closely with Chief Ober to talk to him about the updates, and very closely with Tom Brochure at the health department. They're monitoring it as well, and Sean Riley from the Hampton County ESC, and of course all the principals daily, and I've been emailing the board regularly and updating you on everything we're doing. We've taken a lot of measures to make sure, but the bottom line comes down to with the support of the board and everybody else, that if these numbers continue to rise, we will be unable to activate our safety plans. We'll be unable to cover classrooms, and we're going to be having a lot of lost instruction anyways. So if the board, if it's their will, we would probably have to activate a school closure plan for Thursday and Friday. The incubation period for this particular strand is about 30 days, so we should be back in by April. Just kidding. It's a 4-day incubation period. So if we shut the facility down for Thursday and Friday, Saturday and Sunday, that would give us plenty of time to get everything clean. The unfortunate thing would be we'd have to quarantine everybody out of the facility. So that would mean no extracurriculars, no practices, no questions asked from Larry at all. We would have to shut it down, and because we have to blow it out as well. We have a blowout procedure, and I think we'd be ready by Monday if that's the direction we want to go. So the only thing is if it turns the corner tomorrow and the numbers go down, I think we could push through the rest of the week, but we're not thinking that's going to be an issue.
And you've seen an increase almost every day for the last week. So
Yes.
this isn't something that's just kind of steady. It's getting worse.
We saw it last week as well. So,
Yeah.
and I think one of the biggest things, in addition just to, students, is we had 14 classrooms that
that's not.
that weren't covered today. So we're pulling people, and I think we had subs calling in sick that were originally there, and they're calling in sick.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, as I expressed to Craig, I think that's my biggest concern, is just the uncovered classrooms. I mean, if you had all your staff there and you had students missing, you could still get quality instruction in during that time. But the uncovered classrooms has to be hard to manage for the administrative team, and stressful for every other teacher who's there at work too. So yeah.
I think Holly, Adam, and I have all covered at some point. It's like riding a bike, isn't it? Yeah.
So that's the public update. I'll continue to update it. Hopefully tomorrow by 10:30, the principals can get us the accurate numbers. We can make an informed decision, and Lisa can get something out to our families, and then we can start on the road to recovery. So if I could also thank everybody for their work. The administrative team has been absolutely fantastic. The board's been so supportive. This is very unique. All right. So if this occurs Thursday, we will be on the headlines everywhere. The news will be here. And it'll,
As long as they
it'll
don't
be
go in the
unique.
building.
Yeah, that's right. As long as they don't go in the building. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up to that in case that happens. So I only have one item today. And it's an important one and important discussion. As you guys all know, we have to test all of our juniors, about 175 of our juniors on the ACT test. It's part of our Prepared for Success grade. We got many schools, districts are getting D's and F's on this. And one of the ways of combating this is how do we make the environment positive, supportive, and inclusive to our kids as they take this 5.5-hour test, some longer. We used to put them in the gymnasium, give them seats, start the clock, 6 hours, they're out and they're gone. We lack personnel, we lack space whenever we run the whole school. So the teachers, the counselors, and the administration is requesting from the board a change of the calendar. And we're asking that on February the 25th, that we make it a non-school day for grades 9, 10, and 12. And we bring in 11th grade and the rest of the school as normal. And that allows us to spread our wings and utilize our entire high school fleet to test and work with the kids and hope to improve the environment and improve our test scores as well. So that's all I have. If we want to get take a deeper dive, Mr. Smiley can answer any questions you might have if it's a building level type thing.
Just a quick question on a building level question.
Sure.
I know we have some eighth graders that take ninth grade level classes. How will they be affected by this?
Well, so I think in terms of, they would not be taking the ACT, and I don't think we'd have an effect.
You just
They would be
absorb
able to-
them?
Yeah, they'd be able to cover that, so.
Okay.
And I mean, I can speak a little bit to it, so like, really, we started looking into, when we talk about prepare for success, keep in mind that's 2 years in arrears, so like, the score that we're gonna get next year on the report card is already decided, so this would kind of be the first of the next 2 years that would eventually roll on. 2 years ago, it was mandatory for students in Ohio to take the ACT. And we have 2 dates, the 25th and the 10th. So we selected the 25th to try to get away from state testing. So, you know, with that being said, you know, I was working with the counselors in our BLT and got feedback about the previous years. And I think putting kids in a gym is not the best environment to do that. They also tried quarantining kids, kind of like, well, maybe quarantining might not be the best word right now, but sectioning them in like one wing of the building. But the issues that come with that is we have, with all the students that need accommodations, finding the appropriate spaces for them to get those accommodations. And that's always the struggle, and putting them in like a side room or one of those little learning spaces on the side is not the best place. I mean, I did some digging and reached out. I reached out to all the CHL. I reached out to Oak Hills. My wife's at Oak Hills, so that was an easy one.
Yeah.
But so kind of what I found out is Finneytown does the same schedule that we're proposing. Oak Hills, and actually like as we move forward, kind of like the one I'm about to share are the ones that I think might be the best option down the road. So Oak Hills and let me see which school. In Indian Hill, sorry. They basically what they do is they give the pre-ACT, which we already gave, and the ACT on the same day. So they have their 10th and 11th graders both testing. Their seniors, they have something off-site for them. Things like that would be a day that is like a college visit or a trade school visit. And then the freshmen, they do some sort of activity again off-site for the freshmen, which I think planning that, I just think at this point in the year, it's not able to really get that accomplished. And then the other 2 schools were Deer Park and Reading, and they had everybody on site during those days and kind of do what we've done in the past. So I think the biggest thing is I mean, it's a pretty high stakes test, you know, for our kids getting into college, but also for our accountability measures. And we just wanted to try to find the best way to provide that space and, you know, the opportunity for kids to have the best environment to test them.
And we have 37 kids receiving accommodations on the test.
I was about to ask that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I believe that is, they're working on groups right now. It's gonna be 5 to 6 groups of students.
Now,
So
there's
that's-
37, they each have different accommodations,
Yeah,
so it's not like you can
more
say they all get half hour more time. It may be they need to be able to get up and walk or do other things.
Yeah, some of them get stop clock breaks, some of them get double time, triple time, some of them get readers. There's, I'd say 10 of them are probably one-on-one testing, and then you can group the others in small group, probably 5 or less. So
Yeah.
having the staff in the rooms available for that is huge. Last year, we have 10 days to do accommodations, so we can start on the testing. We have 10 extra days after. So we were testing every single day of those 10 days,
So you're pulling them out and doing them in the
pulling out,
future.
and then it led right up into state testing.
Okay.
So that's really why we moved to February this year, because that March date put us right up to the English test.
Yeah.
And it was, I think this will just be a good, you know, to do that, give a few more weeks, and then we have the air testing beginning, so.
It's less loss of instructional time for both the teachers and the students.
Absolutely.
Get it all done on one day.
So the freshmen, the 9th, 10th, and 12th grade teachers are gonna help our junior teachers administer this test.
So-
So we're gonna be proctors.
Basically, we'll look at splitting kids between all of the teachers, and so the groups, like regular groups, will be pretty small, you know, as opposed to having 25, 30 kids in a room and then trying to find places for the accommodations, so.
And we've never done this in the past, correct?
We have
This is the
not,
first time.
and so like in the past, it was either in the gym, or it was, we put a wing and close down a
And
wing
this is only
and
the
test her
third
there.
year. It
Right,
just
okay.
started 2 years ago,
And,
so yeah.
and kind of like what I heard from teachers are, number one, I think in the past there was a delay. And so,
Correct.
but during that delay, you're 2 hours into this test and people are coming into the building, there's that noise. And honestly, if you try to like section off a wing, that's pretty tough to do, you know? So I think just limiting those disruptions and trying to give them a space where they're not gonna have to worry about that would be great, so.
Yeah, I think this is a really good solution. I would ask that the team make sure that you have this in place at the start of next academic year, just so we don't, I mean, I know you're working on it, and I am okay, agreeing to this short-term kind of change in schedule thing. But I'm just encouraging you to continue that conversation and come up with that plan, just so parents know from day one.
Absolutely, and I think, I'll take the brunt of that, so year one, I'm trying to learn, and as these things come up, trying to plan through the best solution. I think as we look to the future, I would like to have a model where we test pre-ACT, ACT on the same day, create a senior day that's off-site, and find something off-site for our freshmen. To me, that's the best solution, but I think in the short term, I don't know another option.
Yeah, I'm not saying you have another option. I'm just asking. I just think it would be beneficial.
And thanks for doing the hybrid idea, because I know at first we started with just sending the whole district home, and we found another way to accommodate so that we're not impacting as many students. So thank you for going back and looking at that. I appreciate that.
And I think that's the best model, honestly. I just think that this year, if we did make a change, I think we don't have the time to probably get effective things set for the other grade levels. So,
How do we inform these parents of these changes? Do we just send an email out? Do we send flyers home? Is there some type of mass text message?
well, I think.
And not just this in general, but,
I
like
think
with the flu situation.
as many ways as possible. So I think we would send out there's an email message that goes to each grade level. So it would go to students, it would go to families. I think we'd probably put this on social media. I put this on the high school newsletter that goes out. So we would get as many ways as we possibly could to get it out. And we now have a month to do it. So I think we can, get in front of that. So.
The good news is that if it has to do with canceling school, they never miss the call. They always get that information. They don't get that. They don't get the ACT test coming up, but they'll get the no school call.
And also, like it was earlier, it was like Mr. Hockenberry. So basically, the tests, like for a typical student, they're going to be done. It's really like with prep and everything, and the test. It'll be like 4 hours, but we have a lot of kids with that extended time and those accommodations that really will stretch for the day. So
Can we start the day for the test takers a little bit later to give them that advantage of having a late start?
sure, or we could have them come in and
I'm not
Do
suggesting
something,
that. I mean, it's just an idea.
yeah.
If we're trying to give them every benefit, then maybe that extra hour if they do a late start rather than letting them off early might help them too.
Absolutely. We have a lot of other ideas with ACT prep, and some things with our counselors and college readiness. I'd love to come back and talk about.
That'd be great.
So,
Please do.
Any other questions? Okay, and can I get a motion? Oh, yeah, sorry.
Item A, request approval of a non-school day for grades 9, 10, and 12 on February 25th, 2020, for utilization of the entire high school staff to administer the ACT to our 11th grade students.
We'll make a motion, we approve item A as read.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Dr. Stafford,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to the treasurer's report. We don't have any items to vote on, but Mrs. Gunler wanted to update us.
Yeah. As I share with the board in previous board meetings, we are moving to a new platform in our software for our accounting, basically. So we have already started that training. This is our third week into the training. We're in a very short window. Next week is our last week that we'll be training. Once we are finished with training on February the 12th, we will have two sessions for training for the building secretaries and anybody else who's involved with doing requisitions and maybe looking at budgets and purchase order details. So I have split it at 11 o'clock and then at 1 o'clock. And the reason I've done that is because we can't have everybody out of the building at one time. So I sent out an email to everybody that needs to come to the training and also to their principal or administrator or supervisor. So it's 11 and 1, and I'd have them get back to me to figure out which one they want to go to, and we'll try and get that. And once they do that, on the week of the 18th and on the week of the 24th, we'll be doing what we call dual entering. So if you're a secretary and you enter a requisition in the new system, you also have to have it in the old system. And then we'll run reports to make sure those reports will balance. once we're done with that 2-week parallel entering, what I'll do then is then I'll start to go through the month close. I will close in the old system, then I will close in the new system. Once that new system is, that month is closed and open, we will be live in March. And I pushed it up in March because we have other things going on this school year that I wanted to hurry and get that out of the way. So hopefully by March the 4th, all the month-end closing should be done, so we should be live on March 4th. So I just want to kind of update everybody in the community. And
And you're very impressed with the new system that we have.
Yes, it's very, it's more versatile. It's, the building uses what we call USAS Web. It's a web version in our office for payroll processing. I call it the old DOS system. It's not really that, but that's what it looks like. And that's the only way we can process payroll. We can't process it in Windows at all. So what has happened is the state, it's what we call it SSDT. It's the state software development team up in Columbus. For years, as long as I've been in education, we're going to the window version. We're going to the window version. And it's never happened in all the years I've worked in education. So finally, ODE said, we're done. We're moving in that direction. So what's happened is now the state is saying as of the end of 2022, we will no longer support state software. So we have to move. And it's just as when we're going to move. And some people don't want to get on till all the bugs are worked out. But it is what it is. And I wanted to move us more forward because, like I said, we have things coming down the pike in the next couple of years. And I think we need to focus on those things.
Thanks for all your work and your staff.
Thank you.
Thank you for that update. All right, we'll move on to the discussion items. The first one is the board policy, JEB, the entrance age for mandatory kindergarten. So this, I don't know if you want to take this, but this policy we approved at the January 7th meeting, and it had a date change. So it went from September 25th to August 1st. September, I don't know why it was 25th. It just sounded right. But September 30th to August 1st. So we had that change. So clearly that's going to affect kindergarten entrance this year. So Mr. Biedenbach and his team is here. So I guess what's the plan? What do you want to do? How can we support with that?
So I appreciate you putting it back on just for discussion. Just so everybody knows, it kind of came up through conversation with our kindergarten team. And the thought process behind it is, as school districts, and we're one of them, continue to move our start date earlier in August, we're having really, we can have 4-year-olds longer into the school year now. So you could be 4 years old until September 30th and be in kindergarten. So we're seeing some immaturity, things like that. A lot of that can be anecdotal, things that we see. So if it was an August 1st date, we wouldn't have any students starting that's not 5 years old. So that was kind of where we started, and the intention was to come and go through the committees and present the information. Not sure how everything happened. You voted on it, and we were thrilled that you supported that. But we wanted to make sure that you understood where it was coming from, and that we know we have a kindergarten registration date coming up in March, so we're starting to get information out through our preschool program, through our kindergarten teachers, trying to get all those families, and we want to make sure we're communicating the right thing out, the right date. So we wanted to just make sure, I guess what I'm saying is we support that change. We would like that change to go to August 1st. We think it'll bring more students that are ready for kindergarten, the rigors of kindergarten anymore. That sounds silly when you're talking with the high school principal here, but the rigors of kindergarten are totally different than they used to be. And we're a full day program, and we want to make sure that the students are ready for it. One of the things that we did is I reached out to our Head Start program. So our Head Start program is helping a lot of our students in the district that are financially not able to pay for a preschool program, and they can't fill. They were a half-day program. They had 2 half-day classes. They could not fill, so they actually created a full day. Rather than cutting the program, they created a full-day preschool program here at CT Young, and they're still not full. So we reached out to them. Their stance has always been when kids are age eligible for kindergarten, then they are not accepted at Head Start anymore. So I wanted to make sure, because they're a county program, that we weren't going to leave any kids out in the cold where they fall in that age range. And they said, no, as long as they live in our district, if they're not age eligible for our district, they would even be able to return for their third year if necessary. So we're just trying to make sure we're not leaving any of those kids out in the cold for another year. But we looked at it this year, there's 22 students that fall between that October or August 1st and September 30th date. So there's 22 students that could be 4 years old when they start kindergarten, and some of those students could be, just looking at the dates, they could be 4 for 34 days out of the 41 days in the first quarter. So over 80% of the first quarter, they're still 4 years old.
Well, this isn't uncommon. I looked at the ODU website for the different school districts, and a lot of them are going to August 1st, so it seems to be
Across
a
the
trend.
state, it's about 50-50. I don't have the exact number, but it's about 50-50. In Hamilton County, we were going back and forth a few times. A few years ago, there was nobody. Then we saw one school pop up. Last year, there were 3, and I believe this year we're at least 4. So the ODE doesn't have this current year's data up there. So from last year, there were 3 districts in Hamilton County with the August 1st date. And now I believe Deer Park went to it as well. And I know Reading, we've been in contact with Reading because they're kind of doing this parallel research right now, trying to figure out what they want to do for next school year or the next.
For those kids that are in that in-between period, do they all always go up, or do some of them stay back? They
So
usually all go up.
typically, I wouldn't say they all go up, and I wouldn't say they all are retained.
It's a mix.
It's a mix.
I can speak so when I was at Amity, we did the same thing. We moved, and an article showed, and I don't know what it would be here, but there's not a ton of retentions, but our retentions for students in that window were double what the other students were. And so I think you see a lot of schools making that move at this point.
Well, in our move to full-day kindergarten a few years ago, I think that just makes it that much more important, because asking a 4-year-old to do a half-day program is one thing, but asking them to do a full-day program, that's a much bigger deal.
Correct.
So you're good with
We're
keeping it
good
the
with
same?
we're good with it. We just wanted to make sure the board was good with it before we didn't want you to feel like, oh, snuck that one in with all the other board policies. We want to make sure that we were all on the same page before we started communicating that
Well,
out.
you're starting your screening for this upcoming year, so is this going to be easy to communicate? Do you have any concerns about parents being kind of surprised by this, or do you feel comfortable with it?
So that was my only concerns. We didn't want to surprise, and I know we're talking like this year, 22 students out of 160 something students. So it's not a large group of kids, but it is a good percentage. I feel comfortable that we can get this communicated out. Since we really haven't put anything out about kindergarten registration yet, there may be a small handful that have had previous students that knew the date before. Some might not even have known what the date was.
Yeah.
So I feel confident we can get that communicated out pretty quickly.
And as a district, we could have the flexibility that if you had a student within that window of time that was exceeding expectations, we would have the ability to move them up or
There's an
accept
early
them into
entrance.
kindergarten.
It
I mean,
becomes
we
an
could
early entrance.
still do that if there's somebody within that window of time that your team feels like, yeah, this student could absolutely move into kindergarten. We could potentially still have that option.
It's the same process as grade acceleration.
Yeah.
So like we had 5 that looked for it. We had 1 that qualified. So it's the Iowa acceleration scale. So they go through, and it's cognitive and academic testing, and then there's interviews with parents and child, and kind of there's a total score at the end that says this kid would be good for this or not good for this.
So the
But
question
there's
would be,
a
is are we
process.
set up to do that this year? Could we do
We
that?
already have that policy.
Okay.
And we maybe not every year, but I know we've had a couple students who have, even beyond that September date, applied for it. So we have
So
that
we've
in
already been
place
doing
already.
that.
It would just basically be moving that date up to the August 2nd.
That sounds good.
Any other questions, discussion for it? Okay, well, thank you for coming. Thank you for bringing your troops
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever's left standing.
Yeah. All right, the next discussion we have is the strategic plan. So I brought a packet for everyone. I guess it's the teacher and me. I wasn't quite sure how prepared you'd be for class. I'm gonna take one. So all that's in here is the email that I sent that just gave you the objectives for today and then kind of the goals for that. And then I gave you a copy of the internal stakeholder feedback from the pillars. I made a copy of that in case you didn't have it. And then the last page in your packet, I just printed off this diagram for SMART goals, just so we can, as we talk through our goals for it, we can make sure they're smart. Okay, so our first objective is just to relook at the pillars that we presented to our internal stakeholders and that feedback and just decide if we feel like we need to change any, add to any, those sorts of things. Any initial thoughts? Well, my initial thought was, I think the internal stakeholders relatively agreed with us in terms of the pillars we presented. I think they were in favor of them and they liked them, and we relatively had good feedback on those.
The comments that we got that were, if you call them negative, they would say they were too broad. So they may not have understood our purpose totally, so that they were meant to be super broad. So I don't really think that they were necessarily disagreeing with the topic area. They were just saying, well, we want to see more specifics underneath it, which is what we plan to do.
Right? Yeah, I agree with that.
I just put a note on the title for pillar 2 instead of engagement, I put stakeholder engagement. That was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably was the one pillar that we probably had the most feedback on a name change around that. So some that was presented was Three Rivers community engagement, family, student, and community engagement. Somebody said collaboration.
I think that's why stakeholders so good, because it encompasses all of those.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm hearing is change the engagement pillar to stakeholder engagement.
Yes.
Any objections to that? Okay, all right. I thought development was good. We had some feedback about changing that to maybe like employee development. But I think ultimately we probably don't want to pin that to just employee development. I mean, I think that will be probably an aspect of that pillar. But I think there's lots of other things that we really could talk about in terms of development for the district over the next 5 years.
And employee development makes it too narrow.
Yeah.
I agree.
We did have a comment about could what we're envisioning for that pillar fall under the engagement pillar? So I think that's a good comment to at least try to discuss if our envision could fall under there. I don't want to make one pillar too large. You don't want to have like 7 objectives for
I think
one
that's two
pillar.
different things, those stuff,
Right.
engagement, development, too,
Yeah,
I agree.
different things, totally.
One's
I-
involvement.
yeah,
Getting buy-in and then you build.
right. Yeah, yeah. I agree. I like keeping them separate, but
I do as well.
all right. And then fiscal responsibility, great title. That was one. Great title. We did get these suggestions of fiscal responsibility and stewardship. Do we feel like there's some benefit to adding and stewardship to that, or I don't think you do anything to the pillar by adding it or not adding it, so we could. I know this is like word details, but
I think fiscal responsibilities.
good. Okay, all right, okay. And then the last one was the health/safety. So some of the feedback on that was Three Rivers Wellness, safety and wellness instead of the health portion. Safe school climate, I think that would absolutely be an aspect of that pillar. But I think health and safety could go much deeper than just a safe school climate.
I think that's why
mean,
it needs the health, because you can be safe but not be really healthy, and there's a mental health aspect that would be left out with just safety.
But if we like safety and wellness, I think that could encompass
Yeah.
some of those areas of health that we may be thinking. I mean, wellness is going to still be able to touch on, mental health and some of those areas that should probably be a focus in our strategic plan.
Safety and wellness, the advantage for that, I think it's kind of awkward to have the / health safety, and it kind of makes it consistent with the other pillars just in the way we've written them. So I think that would be
Okay.
a good idea.
All right. So again, what I'm hearing, we'll change health/safety to safety and wellness. Any objections with that? Okay. All right.
Well, I think in this very simple exercise, just probably 10 words that we're looking at, we've changed 3 or 4 words just from the feedback from the teachers. So it shows the value in doing that.
Okay, so in terms of that objective, so what we'll do is we'll alter those 2 on the survey, and change those 2 pillars there, and then we will send that survey out to our external stakeholders to get very similar feedback on those new pillars and see what we get there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And when will this be sent out?
I mean, our goal is by Friday. So, I mean, that's kind of been our goal for the surveys. That gives a few days to construct them and
Assuming there's somebody in the building.
review them.
Send it
Well,
out.
These are external.
I guess we'll have to work from home.
So you're changing the wording to go external?
Yeah, so we will change the engagement to stakeholder engagement and the health/safety to safety and wellness. But we'll put out the same survey we put out to internal. We'll just put it out to external with those name changes and just get their feedback on just the pillars for external. Okay, so our next objective is to review and start drafting the objectives for the student success pillar. So what I tried to do, just so we're not like kind of fishing in the dark. So what I gave you was the goals from the current draft of the Three Rivers Strategic Plan. So that draft that we had, I gave you the 2 that fell under that pillar. But then I also tried to give you some other student success objectives that were from other strategic plans, just so we had some to reference to. And then I'll let somebody else talk. So the other thing I did put in the survey feedback, I think even though we weren't asking our internal stakeholders for necessarily some feedback on each particular pillar, I think they gave us some good ideas that could also help us just kind of think about and envision some of these objectives in the pillar. So I think on that feedback sheet that I gave you, underneath, I think that could also help us get a sense of maybe what they're thinking before we actually send it out to draft for them. Okay, so where do we want to start with that?
Can we just copy the Kent School District?
Um,
They're, reading through that, it's very well written. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so for all of you sitting here, so the objective that Tracy's referring to. It says, prepare all students to be college and career ready by raising the academic and social emotional learning bar and closing the pre-K to 16 gaps to student achievement and college completion. So that's what they have on their strategic plan as an objective. I think that's a hefty objective.
But when you drill into their information, just, I kind of tunnel into all the websites and go and search. Yeah, so what they did is very nice.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think the aspect of that objective and based on the internal stakeholder feedback, I definitely think college and career readiness should be an objective within that pillar.
I think that is the end game, and I think we do want to have something in there about what the end game, what we want from our district. I think we should also, though, talk about the path too, and say, I would like to see us have a goal of meeting each kid where they are and bringing them as far as they can go, as much as they can learn while they're in each grade, so that we're not just saying, when you're a 12th grader, here's where we want you to be. I think we need to do that. I think that's important. But I also think it's important to say, when you're in second grade, our focus is to meet you wherever you are in your learning journey and taking you to the furthest place that you can go and being what you need as a district to focus on, while they're here.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to that objective at all. So we can always say we like it. Let's throw it out to the internal stakeholders and see what they think.
Yeah.
And see if they come back and say, and
I think on this one more than any other one, I'd really like to hear what the teachers have to say, because I think that we're going to get a lot of feedback on this one.
yeah.
And there will be a lot of steps within. I mean, we're just sitting out the overriding,
Yeah.
here's the goal for this.
It's still pretty broad.
This is what the pillar is. This is the very broad objective. And then within that, we're going to have a series of,
Yeah.
these are the details of what go into this pillar. And then we will have metrics for measurement of
Yeah.
success.
Yeah.
This is almost like the definition of the word. Like,
Right.
you get the word, here's the definition, and then here are the action
This is
steps,
how
this is
we
how we're
apply
going to do it.
Right.
Yeah. Is there anything else under this one that we should be focused on? Because the two things that we've mentioned is we want to have them prepared for college or their career. We want to make sure that we're teaching them to the degree that we can and pushing them as far as they can go while they're here. Is there something else we should be focused on?
So I really like it with Lakota. I really like their that first bullet under we are personalized. So it says personalized learning is tailoring instructional environment to address the individual needs, skills, and interests of the whole child while developing a deep personal connection to maximize student ownership of learning. So I kind of like that tidbit too of
I really like the student ownership of learning at the end part.
Yeah.
The focus on teaching a kid how to learn, not how to think, not what to think.
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking, yeah.
I do like personalized learning because, we always see plans for kids with the IEPs and maybe some with the gifted, but the kids in the middle, what's that?
And you've got social and emotional too, how they can prepare themselves
That's better than what I
for all
said.
that too as well.
Personalized learning is a good way to say it. Will that fall under another pillar later? Is that something that the social and emotional,
Right.
should we mention it here though?
Emotional, probably awareness, that agreement on it, I would think, so that would probably go into goal 5. The safety and wellness.
Yeah, but I think we could tailor, like that Kent objective, I think we could tailor it to say, if we're going to have kind of this safety and wellness pillar, then we're probably going to address social emotional learning and mental health and those sorts of things like we heard today. That's probably going to be over in that pillar. But we could just say, prepare all students to be college and career ready by raising the academic bar and closing the pre-K 6 to 16 gaps to student achievement and college completion. So we could just remove that social emotional learning
Keep it
in
fluid.
there and kind of funnel that thought over to that pillar, but still keep that that academic piece in that objective. Are we okay?
Yeah, the
Good
first
with that,
bullet
at
for
least
the
to
Lakota
start.
and the first bullet for Kent, I think both look really
So
good.
if you say prepare students with personalized learning to be college
Yeah.
ready, so we can get both in.
Try to combine the two.
Yeah,
in
I think
the
that's a good
language.
idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think that. All right. So I will wordsmith these and put them out for review before we put them into the survey.
In that mashup, if you can get that phrase, students' ownership of learning, that would be great, but if it doesn't mash up right.
I will try my best. I do teach math. I'm not an English teacher, so I'll try my best. All right. So let's just review the two that are in our current draft, just to see kind of what the thought was in the direction of those and figure out if we feel like we're missing that within that objective or if we want to add it. So ensure students have the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that align with a pathway of interest, passion, purpose, and prosperity.
I think that's definitely the Kent one, but I think the Kent one just says it more specifically and talks more specifically about the end goals. So I think that it's covered. I don't think we're dropping the concept.
Yeah. And the second one talks about ensuring students have access to teachers and principals who are impactful, student-centered, and collaborative.
I don't think we're directly talking about that one, but I think when you're talking about ownership of learning, when you're talking about personalized learning, I think that's where they're impactful, student-centered. Student-centered is personalized learning, so
It's implied.
yeah, it's implied.
And I think we could be able to support kind of that theory too, and some of the other pillars when we're talking about, collaboration between teachers and principals, and then you have the student ownership part of it that comes into this one. I think we probably could get to some of that too, and in other pillars too. Okay. Anything else? All right, so we'll start with trying to just get that one. Yes,
Baby steps.
okay,
I
all
think that
right.
one's gonna be a pretty loaded one. I think we'll be able to do a lot of action steps based on that.
All right, well, we'll start there. I'll wordsmith that and try to get that objective out, and then we'll put it out to the internal stakeholders and get their feedback on it, and then we can combine and see what they say, and we can go from there.
So,
And if as you're working with this, if it doesn't mash together very well, we could always separate them and make two separate ones if we really want to. So it's always an option.
All right, well, I'll play around with it and send it out to you for feedback before. Okay. Well, that was quick and productive and,
It helps to have these examples. I found them to be really
Okay.
helpful.
okay,
It
all right,
does.
okay, good. I'm glad it's helpful. Just to recap our steps, we'll send out the external stakeholder survey for the change in pillar language. We will send out that objective for the student success pillar to our internal stakeholders by Friday for their review. And then next meeting, we will review internal and external data and just keep this process going. Okay. Okay. All right. The next discussion item is the levy planning.
Do you want me to report on the meeting
If you
yesterday?
wouldn't mind. So we had, there was an engagement meeting. Mr. McDonald attended and Mrs. Gunler was there, and the union reps were there.
Report here.
So go ahead and just report out how that meeting went.
What we have created is an engagement community group. It's a core group of people who are going to help us have a conversation with our community. And what I mean by that, it sounds like what I would normally call happy talk, but it really isn't. It really has a specific purpose. Quirky, our advisor, has done this in other districts, and he comes in and helps us with facilitating a conversation about not just, we don't want to go out and say, we're going to put a levy on the ballot. We really hope that you vote for it. Because what you're doing is you're telling the voters, this is what we need. We've made all the decisions, and here's what you should do. We don't want to tell our voters what to do. We want them to tell us what to do. So what the goal is to go out and have a conversation about the district's finances, educate people about where we are, how much money we're bringing in, what we're spending our money on, and then letting them tell us, what are your priorities? Okay, we have a band program. We have our arts programs. We have language programs. We have this many teachers teaching these classes. If we bring in so much money, we can continue to do all these things the way they're doing them now. If we don't, however, let's say in 2 years, we'll have $1 million shortfall, let's say. I'm just coming up with random numbers. These aren't real. Alice, don't yell at me. So if we have $1 million shortfall, what does that mean? Well, this is what these programs cost. Obviously, we can't continue to do all of these programs. So you in the community tell us, do you want us to keep doing this? If you do, then this is the millage that we need to continue to do what we're doing. If you don't, what do you want us to cut? So it really makes a conversation, it really lets the community members see what's at stake. And so if you don't want to put a levy on the ballot, and that's what you tell us, we're going to tell you in advance what we would have to do. And we need your input, because we don't want to cut a program if you don't want us to cut a program or staff or something that we're doing. So it focuses the conversation and gets the buy-in of the community to say, you tell us what to do. And what Courtney said is that nobody's going to tell you to cut programs and to do anything that's going to hurt our kids. Nobody's going to do that. Well, maybe one or two, but other than a few really nasty people, most people are going to want to support their community. So when you let them know what's at stake, and when you let them know the timing, and you let them have a say in what we're doing, then they're going to be more willing and they're going to be more bought in to want to support you when that levy does hit the ballot, because they're going to have been the ones making the decision. And then we talked about a timeline for how does this look in reality. And so there's a process. You start with the board, and we have a conversation about what is that financial situation? What are we spending? What are the programs? When do we go into deficit spending, which we're already in? And then when do we hit at a point where we have to start making discussions about cutting back? What's that date? When are some dates that we could go on the ballot? What programs would we cut if we never got new money? Those sorts of things. Then we go to our teachers and we have a conversation with them, and we let them know all that data, and we talk to them. What do you guys think? And we keep expanding from there. Then we talk to our parents. we talk to our students, and then we engage our community. And we do this by having coffees, by going into people's homes, by having one-on-one conversations. And as we talk and as we generate those ideas and thoughts and share the data, we build a group of people who are going to help us and support us, so that when it comes time to do the levy, we have a long list of names who are our supporters, people who have been involved from the ground floor building this idea, and hopefully we've built up a lot of support in the process. And Corky said where they've done this, they've been very successful. And it sounds like a really great way to have a community conversation about what could be a contentious issue. So that was our discussion. We started working on a timeline to start to see what that would look like. Alice is working on developing some numbers to help us start that conversation. So we're in the infancy of this, but we really need about a 1-year time frame to have the conversation. And luckily, based on the numbers, the preliminary numbers that we looked at, we have time to have that 1-year conversation. So that's what we discussed.
All right, thank you.
Ownership from all of the communities. That's what we need. We gotta have it. So, it's great.
But one of the things he really stressed on is working with the board, then the staff, then the parents,
Slow
students, and go out that way. But we, so he stressed on that, so.
And I wanted to thank the 2 union representatives that were on our team. They were very energetic and enthusiastic, and they've really provided a lot of great energy for us. And I think that they're going to really be a huge asset to have on the steering committee. So I was very excited that they came with that energy.
Very positive.
All right, if there's no other discussion, we do have a need for executive session. So executive session permits discussion in executive session for specific matters required to be kept confidential by state law, rules, or state statutes. The topic for executive session is the appointment of public personnel. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session for the discussion of the employment of public personnel.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Dr. Stafford,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder,
Yes.
and Mrs. Miller.
Yes.
We will come back afterwards to adjourn. That's it. You're free to go.
You won't be voting.
Yeah. About Thursday, Friday.